Basically going to start. I'll share my screen. Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope all of you guys are doing well and doing amazing, especially since it's kind of sunnier outside, but it's still kind of cold. But I hope all of you guys are doing amazing. And today, RAPS is presenting Women in STEM, another alumni panel. And I'm very glad that we're reviewing a perspective on the women in STEM. Before we start, I would like to do a shout out to Ruan, our service chair, and alumni Vanessa Palma for reaching out to all the panelists. So today we're going to view the accomplishments and the experiences of a few women in STEM who were once part of RAPS. So we're gonna do the intros in a few seconds, but I would like to tell all of you guys that you are free to ask questions throughout this event. And at the end, there's going to be an audience Q&A. So at the end, I'll look through the chat and see if there are any questions for a specific panelist or for all the panelists. So we're gonna do the introductions. First is Alaya.
Hi guys, my name is Alaya Masuda. I graduated Rutgers in 2019. I majored in biomedical engineering and minored in psych. I am now currently the lead systems engineer at WindPact. We're a materials, data, and technology company, so we provide some analytical tools to improve the product development process. So my role there as a systems engineer is I work closely with our CEO and our COO to kind of work on our operations basically for the entire company. So I help bring that technical perspective, and I'm a certified Scrum Master, so I also provide project management support for our development team as well.
Perfect. And fun facts about her is that she's a Twitch affiliate. You should talk about that a little bit more.
Sure. In my free time, I game a lot, so I play a lot of Call of Duty right now. So that's what I do in my free time. I stream on Twitch.
Amazing. And I've watched a few of her streams and she's really cool. She's really amazing. Perfect. And now we're going to Berna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bernadette Corpus. I typically go by Berna, so I feel like it's just been easier. I graduated Rutgers in 2018, and I studied information technology and informatics. I minored in psychology and DCIM, and I never remember what it actually stands for, so I just say digital media now. And then I interned at Sanofi for the summer before my senior year. So I was a UX intern there as part of an IT rotational development program. And then I was fortunate enough to get a full-time offer. So now I'm an IT project manager. So I've been working with this company since I graduated. And if no one knows what Sanofi is, a few of their products that you might know are Allegra, Zysol, Gold Bond. Those are some of the stuff that we have. And in terms of Rutgers, I was a RAGS co-coordinator in 2015, 2016. So if you guys know the Valengrams, Jashi and I were funny enough to bring that up. And I'm happy to see that still going. Claire kind of informed me on that. And then in terms of outside of RAPS, I was events coordinator and co-president for a Women in IT club. And then a fun fact is that I still don't know how to ride a bike.
Same, it's okay. I don't know how to ride a bike either. I still need to learn, but that's amazing, Berna. And hashtag join RAGS. If you guys are interested in joining RAGS, of course, we're still doing it. And even though it's virtual, I love how we're still doing recordings, and we also did Valengrams. And for battle, we'll also discuss that later. Cool. Next is Carla.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Rodriguez Watson. I am currently the Director of Research at the Reagan-Udall Foundation for the FDA. So I've been in the field of public health for 23 years now. I earned my PhD in epidemiology from the University of Washington. 10 years before that, I received my master's in public health from Columbia University. And you would think that, there's a straight shot from in STEM and going forward, but with all those graduate degrees, you would guess that my undergraduate major was nothing to do in science. As my mom would say, you know, you need a graduate degree if you're going to be a poli-sci major, which I was. So I came into epidemiology mostly from my love of learning that was really stoked at Rutgers, and a public leadership education network from Douglas College that I took advantage of, and I saw that is still available today, that really put me in the presence of a lot of women leaders in Washington, D.C. In my junior year in college, and really introduced me to and got my love of this deep sense of equity and justice that really drove me towards working towards equitable health, equity, and specifically through public health. So let's see, fun facts. Well, I've worked all over the world. I've worked in the Philippines. I've worked across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I have a 10-year-old son. It keeps me super busy, especially during this time of virtual learning for everybody. And I do know how to ride a bike. And I was the RAPS president in 1990 to 91. And I used to surf, but not anymore.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. It's also really great. Wow. Okay, now we're going to move on to the goals of the panel, but before the Q&A, I'll just explain what we'll go through. So the first one is educating students on what it's like and how to prepare for the STEM field, especially speaking about your personal college experience as a female representative. And second, we'll learn how to overcome those obstacles and challenges after your undergrad or grad years. So after your college experience, moving into the work field and the workforce. Then third, we will view a perspective on the challenges that you guys faced and yet overcame as a Filipino-American female in the work field, the STEM field, and workplace. Okay. So the first goal topic, we'll be talking about the college experience. So to prepare for students for what to expect when entering the STEM field as a female representative, and informing them about the resources or the programs that you use. So the first question that I would like to discuss is, why are you interested in STEM? What encouraged you to stay motivated in pursuing a career in STEM? And did you ever have a mentor figure that you looked up to? So would Berna would like to start this discussion?
Sure, I can kick it off. So in terms of why I was interested in STEM, I actually come from a family of engineers and nurses in the med field and stuff. So that's kind of what my exposure was in terms of careers. So the way that my mom was always like making me think was, okay, what do you want to do? And then kind of figure out from there. And I think that coming out of high school, that's not something I was thinking of, like where I wanted to end up. So with my dad's background, he studied chemistry, and I thought, okay, I could do that. I mean, that'll be fun. I did great in high school. So that's kind of how I picked my major. And then when I got to Rutgers, you know, it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. So then I actually failed chemistry. And I think it was honestly damaging to my self-esteem because in high school, it's one of those, you compare high school to college and it's really not the same. Especially I didn't have really good studying habits. So from there is kind of where I was just like, okay, is STEM really for me? And I had a lot of imposter syndrome running through me. And it wasn't until failure that led me to what I actually enjoyed doing. So this is where I pivot to technology. I don't know if anyone's familiar with MySpace, but I dabbled a lot in high school where I would like code and do HTML and CSS. And I know it's really not that much, but I had fun doing it. And then on top of that, I do like to explain technology to people. So I went to go see an advisor within the School of Communication Information, and her name's Sharon Storger. I don't know if she's still there, but she was an awesome person to talk to with everything, because I didn't feel technical enough. I didn't know anything about comp sci or information technology to begin with. So having that kind of resource at Rutgers was very helpful in helping me navigate through how I wanted to keep going. So I took the intro class, and it worked out really well for me. So I definitely found something that I enjoyed, and that's kind of what kept me moving throughout college.
Amazing. And would anyone else like to touch upon that, especially Alaya? Would you like to go?
Yeah, I can add to that. Similar to Berna, I grew up with a family involved in STEM. So my mom is a nurse, which I'm sure many of us can relate to. And my dad was an engineer, and my grandfather was an engineer. So I kind of wanted to do something both medical related and engineering, which is why when I did research, I found biomedical engineering. So since like, I would say 4th grade, I wanted biomedical engineering. And then so I went to a high school that was a technical high school where we were separated into different academies. So I was part of the engineering academy. And from there was, I think around 30 to 40 people in engineering. And out of that, 7 were females. So I knew when I was looking for a college that I wanted to have that diversity. So when I was looking for universities, Rutgers, they're, at least in biomedical engineering, they were pretty much 50-50. So I was very fortunate enough when I went through Rutgers that it was pretty even with that male to female ratio, which is what I wanted to be around. And I think having all those fellow females going through the same experience with me throughout my undergrad career really motivated me. So that kind of helped me with how I studied and how I kind of pursued it. So I stuck with biomedical engineering because I knew that that's just what I wanted to do.
Wow, that's amazing. And wow, touching upon that, I know you spoke about like your grandfather, and was he basically like a mentor to you? Like, did he always like encourage you to fight against or like fight towards what you wanted to do as well? Like, can you touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I was talking to Claire before this panel. I think I was very fortunate enough where I grew up in an environment where I wasn't ever, I guess, constrained in a way. So I you know, my grandfather, my dad always kind of pushed me to go into STEM. It wasn't ever, oh, most females don't go into STEM, don't do that. So I was fortunate enough to grow up in that type of environment. So even at Rutgers, having those the peers that I had to motivate me in the STEM field, really what pushed me to continue in that field. I know there's a lot of toxic environments where, oh, you're a female, you're not supposed to be there. I was fortunate enough that I was never put in that place.
That's great to hear. I mean, I'm surprised at the ratio male to female at Rutgers in biomedical engineering.
Right. And I think that also comes with a lot of people think that well, first of all, biomedical engineering is usually the undergrad major if you're interested in engineering to go into the medical field. So a lot of my peers now are involved in pharmaceuticals and involved in some sort of laboratory experience. And I think there's also that stereotype where if you're going to get involved in that field, you're usually a female, because the men in engineering usually go into other mechanical or hands-on type careers. So that's right. A whole other issue itself too, but that's why right. I enjoyed having that environment though, because you can't have diversity without diversity of thought. And so you need to have different types of people to be able to come up with the most novel ideas.
Yeah. And healthcare, right, is seen as a safe right. female environment, I think.
Exactly.
That, Claire, where you can be a leader in healthcare when you're a female, because that's it's one of those nurturing fields, and it's allowed.
That's true. Like, a lot of people do expect that if you're a female, then like you're categorized in a specific field. But like, I'm glad that you guys are out there and you do the things that you want to do, and not do the things that are just like told to you or what is expected of you. So that's amazing. So like, moving on to the next topic, well, the next question is like, how were your classes at college? Like, what resources did you use, such as programs, extracurriculars, or clubs that helped you progress in your future workplace. So we can start off with like Carla, if you'd like.
Sure. So I mentioned that my route was not linear as Elias or Bernie's was. So, but I was in a women's studies class and really got engaged in and interested in women's reproductive health rights. I went, like I said, through Douglas College Public Leadership Education Network, went to Washington, D.C. at a time when Bill Clinton was just, took the presidency. I was working on Title IX legislation stuff with my organization there where I was placed, and met all these great female leaders in our nation, and working on women's reproductive health rights, legislation for children. And I got very interested in advocacy for women's health. And then after I graduated, I was working in New York City, and then I wound up working in the Philippines for the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, and really thought about kind of thinking about how to do advocacy rather than through a lens of like the legal aspect, but through science and advocating from a science perspective on time in what is, good public health policy. And so that's what led me down this path of continuing to do work in public health that was focused on understanding health disparities in populations. And we're seeing a lot of that come to fruition now in COVID-19. I think it's been good in terms of being an epidemiologist. It's great because finally, I think that word epidemiology has been out there so much that people are starting to finally understand that I'm not a skin doctor. Even my dad knows what I do now. And I think like both the other panelists had said, my family, my father is a chemical engineer. Both myself and my two brothers went to Rutgers. My two brothers are engineers. I did not follow the mold of what they wanted me to be, which would be a medical doctor or an accountant. They didn't think I had the math skills for engineering. So they kind of left me out of that end, but I wound up doing mathematical modeling. So it's all panning out now. So I would say, what really prepared me in my undergrad was getting exposure to mentors and to experiences, because I'm very much a tactile learner. I don't do well in a didactic setting. I mean, getting a PhD is a lot of independent work and a lot of just real practice. And even my work now is less academic and more applied epidemiology. So I spent over a decade in local public health at New York City, San Francisco, and Seattle, King County. So really doing epidemic outbreak investigations, pandemic preparedness planning, evaluating programs to decrease lead poisoning prevention, creating integrated registries and surveillance systems to monitor vaccine surveillance and look at adverse events. And what I do now is look at basically use big data from healthcare systems, insurance claims to look at safety signals in the real world after drugs and diagnostics go through a clinical trial process. So yeah, it's been, I think, in all those positions, finding people. I think someone asked in the chat earlier, what keeps you going? It's really having a North Star and thinking and always tacking towards that of what it is that you believe in, and finding people that believe in something that you can latch onto and learn from and model your work, because you're spending like 60% of waking hours working. So you should really like what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll wind up with migraines and miserable. And that doesn't mean that your work defines who you are, but you should like what you do.
Yes, like what Carla said, it's important to have a mentor, especially in college. And even though like a few of us here are freshmen, it's good to like reach out now, and especially like knowing and how to understand the thing that you're actually studying. It's not like you're just majoring in that because of this or that. It's important to know how it actually works and functions in the real world. So like moving onwards would be the second goal topic. And it's basically after undergrad and grad school. And Carla already touched upon this, but for a question is, how do you balance your professional and personal aspects in your life after undergrad and grad years? Like, how do you balance your workplace environment and basically your friends or family on the side? So would Berna like to start with that?
Sure, I can start. This is actually something that when I first graduated, I was like, I definitely want to establish these boundaries early on. So when I got to the office and started my full time, this is something I discussed with my manager. I'm just like, okay, so what are the hours that you expect me to work? Because the way that my company works, as far as like the IT department goes, is that we're basically you work your 8 hours. No one's really monitoring you as long as you're available and you can respond, and you're not just fooling around or whatever. It's basically like the integrity of it. And then on Fridays you're allowed to work from home. So in terms of balancing my personal life and professional, I told this to Claire, the thing that I did was I had that hard stop at 4 p.m. I'd start at 8 o'clock, and that was just a way for me to separate, have time after work to go spend time with family, go to the mall, do stuff for me that I like to enjoy. And that was something that worked at first. And I think that once we shifted to everyone working from home, it was really hard to kind of maintain those boundaries because everyone was working from home. So the expectation that I felt was that everyone needed me at all times. So I found myself working longer hours and hours. So if anything, that's something that I want to reinstate now that, especially everyone's working from home and COVID's still a thing. But in terms of personal hobbies, I like to make sure I spend time at the gym. That's something that actually kind of motivates me to kind of keep moving, and cooking. I like to cook.
Oh, that's really amazing. And like you touched upon, it's also very important to have like time management. And sometimes we take that for granted. So would Carla like to explain how like you transition from your college to your workplace, as well as like how you adapted to that? Because I know that you have like so much experience. How are you able to manage your workplace along with your like family and friends? Like continuing onwards.
I should take a page from Bernadette because the lines have totally blurred with work from home and work from school. So I mentioned I have a family. I have a 10-year-old son, and I find myself, there are not enough hours in the day. I had to start, actually booking time in my calendar. It's just blocking it off, even for myself, to say, okay, it's gym time and it's me time. We got a dog in the pandemic, so I got a pandemic puppy, and that also gives me an opportunity to kind of decompress, go for a walk, listen to my podcasts. And I listen to podcasts that are mostly around COVID-19 and the epidemic. So it's kind of like I'm killing two birds with one stone, but it does allow me to kind of like keep up with, some of the science and the literature that's happening right now that I don't, while I am going for a walk. I like being outside, so it's important that on the weekends I do shut off some of my hours. And sorry, the ice cream truck is it's the first day of spring, so the truck is going around in the back. So my family like to go on hikes, so we go on hikes. So over the weekend, we have my family has a shore house in Rehoboth Beach, the new summer White House. So we go there quite often on the weekends. During the weekday, it's really about me getting as much work as I can get done before my family wakes up and after they go to sleep. So I am not right now a very good example of boundaries with work. Last summer, I had to submit 3 grant proposals in the span of 12 weeks, which is basically unheard of. So it's challenging, and you do burn out. But I think I'm at a point where I can't keep going at 80 hours a week or 60 to 80 hours a week. I could do that for so long, and then my body just shuts down and I'm back down to my regular, like whatever, 50 hours or something like that. You just cannot sustain that. And I just listen to my body. I just listen to myself in my mind and when I'm tired. And I don't push past that, because I know that you're not going to get the best out of me, and you're not going to get, and it's almost fruitless. You're just in this constant, like, circle of death. If you think about your computer screen wheel turning and turning. So that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I definitely resonate with both Berna and Carla. I think before, so when did the pandemic start? Really, like March of last year. So right before then, I had this routine where I would work and come home. I'd work out for about an hour, and then I'd go and have my free time and make dinner, do myself. And I live alone, so I think it's a little bit. It helps a lot with finding time for myself and making that time for myself. And then when the pandemic hit, it was so timely because that was right when my company, so I work with a startup, and Morgan Stanley had a program where they were going to have a 6-month kind of accelerator type program. So we were going to the plan was I was going to spend 2 weeks in New York, come back 2 weeks, and kind of go back and forth for 6 months. So I was planning to be in Jersey. So I was living with my parents for 2 weeks. I was coming into New York. And then they shut down all of a sudden. We were actually in the office in Morgan Stanley, and they just turned off the lights and they said, everyone go home, we're locking down. So at the stay back home in 2 weeks ended up being 8 months that I ended up spending there. So I was living out of my suitcase. And because of work from home, it was hard to find that time. And what's also unique about my experience is because I work at a startup, similar to what Berna said, I don't really have structured hours. We try to work from 9 to 5, but it really is as long as you get your work done. And because it's a startup, sometimes it's very, very minimal work that you would need to get done. Sometimes it's a lot. So if we're filling out, similar to Carla, I had to fill out a military proposal a few months ago. So I was in the office from, 9 a.m., 10 p.m., a couple of days in a row just to get this done, because military proposals are no joke, as Carla would probably be familiar with working with the government. It's just not, so it was hard for me to manage my time, and I'm still struggling right now to try to find that boundary, as Berna referenced, because working at a startup, you need to get done what you need to get done for the company to survive. So oftentimes I'm working 10, 12 hours. I was actually just telling Claire and Ruan, I woke up at 3 p.m. today because I think I've been getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep for the whole week, trying to get done what we need to get done. We're in the middle of a fundraising round, so we need to get a lot of this in. And if it doesn't get done, then the company is going to sink, right? So I guess my body just decided, all right, you're going to sleep today and you don't have a choice about it. But aside from that, I think what I've been trying to do is every Sunday I have a routine. So I know everyone is familiar probably with the Sunday scaries right before the work week starts. So I usually take a bath, I read. I actually have, I'm going to show you guys this book. One second. One of the things that I was fortunate enough to be introduced to at Morgan Stanley is Miss Carla Harris. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. This is one of my favorite books right now. So she is a very, very big advocate of women empowerment in the workplace. And I was fortunate enough to meet her in Morgan Stanley. So she's one of the chief, I can't remember her position, but she's one of the directors at Morgan Stanley. So one of my goals is actually to have her sign this book, but she comes out with a podcast every week to kind of talk about challenges that small businesses face, as well as women, people of color. So if you guys are interested, I can send you guys a link to her podcast. But that I try to listen to that as well too, because I think it's not only me time, but it's also empowering me. Yeah, that's what I like to do.
I just want to add one thing, and I think you made me think of it, Alaya. I think one of the other things that I think as women we need to recognize is this like super mom syndrome or superwoman syndrome. It is impossible to be 100% in all these areas.
Right.
Want to be, you strive to be. But what is so important as you move on through your careers and in your life is that you have a partner that supports you. I mean, whatever that partner is, or somebody to lean on, to help pick up when you're feeling down, to help support the other activities and responsibilities you have in your life. If you are lucky enough to have or want to and have a family and a child, it's important that you're not the only one raising that child, that you have a partner that understands how important that is and the value that is, and is able to contribute.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say.
I actually would like to add to that. So I'm fortunate enough in my job to have a very supportive team. So you know, I often have I often overwork myself. As Carla mentioned, I work maybe 80 hours over that some weeks. But my company is actually very, very understanding. So my boss, he'll message me every now and then, hey, you've been working, take tomorrow off, take today off. So to have that sort of team to kind of back me up. And also we have some very strong women in my company. So they would also kind of check up on me and make sure, hey, are you feeling all right? Are you make sure you're not overworking yourself. And so I'm lucky to have that team.
Awesome. I was actually going to add more because you both added a lot of great insight to this. Carly, you touched upon, incorporating stuff into your schedule. And that's something that I started to do during the pandemic, where I was like, I felt like I wasn't taking time off because I was just like, okay, I'm not going anywhere. So what's the point of that, right? So I would actually start blocking time on my calendar, whether it's like 30 minutes, 45, an hour. And it's really just like mental health. And it's like, okay, step away from your computer, do something that's not work related, do something, like read a book or, something that's not work. Because it's really easy to just be on and continue to keep going, pushing through. And I think that's a great tip to kind of do. So just wanted to add that part.
Yes. So like everything that you guys said so far has been very amazing, especially like Alaya, you added the podcast, which is really amazing. Thank you so much for that. But what some people like take for granted is just like mental health. And I know that since like everything, the majority of things has been like online, sometimes we just forget that like we need the time to take a break, to like maybe like go outside and go for a walk. And some people don't recognize that. Sometimes people beat themselves up because they don't see that. But like I'm grateful that you guys touched upon that, either like reading a book and maybe like even listening to music, being like spending time with your family or your friends. I'm grateful that you guys like took the time like to say that, because some people, especially like college students, sometimes we can see that their health really isn't at the peak of their day, the peak of their week. And it's like our thoughts are always on like doing work and completing work. So like I'm grateful that you guys like spoke about that. So like moving onwards would be, we're going to talk about the Filipino-American female identity. And this is our third goal of topic. So basically it's learning how you guys have like overcome challenges and like seen a new perspective as a Filipino American in the field. So I have a question. What challenges did or do you guys continue to face in your STEM-based field, workplace as a Filipino-American female. So it doesn't have to be like a specific event. It can just be like a general idea, and then it can move towards to a specific event. So would Alaya start this conversation?
Sure. I think one thing that I continue to struggle with in my workplace is, obviously as a female in engineering, it's all of my coworkers are male, right? We actually just hired another female engineer just a few months ago, so it's just me and her as a female in engineering. One thing that I struggle with is, even if I'm leading a meeting, right? I find myself in a unique role where, since I'm working with the COO and the CEO, I have a position of leadership over my engineering peers. And so if I'm leading the meeting, I still struggle with them speaking over me and kind of questioning that authority. And I think it's just because, oh, you're a female, I know more than you, and that kind of attitude, which is toxic. Nowadays, I think they're becoming more aware of it because we have made some hires to kind of, for example, we just hired another CFO, and she is very, she grew up in Wall Street, right? So she was one of the only females in her whole trading floor. So she is very much, she's actually one of Carla Harris's close friends. So she is very much for empowering women as well. So she's brought that sort of energy into the office, which is, I guess, bringing awareness to our peers. But yeah, I oftentimes I'll be speaking in a meeting, and they'll interrupt you by speaking and then continue to speak louder until you stop. And you and then our CFO, she has this new habit where she'll put her hand up and just say, "Stop, I'm talking." And I think that's one thing that we all need to, as females in STEM, is one thing that we need to learn how to do, is to speak up and not to be afraid to say, "Hey, I'm talking right now. I have good insight." Like I said before, diversity doesn't come if you don't have diversity of, true diversity comes with diversity of thought. So it's not just different colors, different races, it's different experiences. And obviously you need to acknowledge that everybody grows up in a different environment. People have different experiences, so they will bring something different to the table. And I think that's still hard for people to grasp, at least in my experience, because a lot of them are engineers. So they all grew up in a male dominated environment. So they're not used to seeing a female in their field. They're not used to seeing a person of color in their field, because again, a lot of nowadays it's still a challenge for engineers. For females to be engineers, for females to be in STEM, and for people of color to be in those fields. So people aren't used to it, and I think only recently is it being more common. So people still are starting to get used to seeing these type of people in their field. And right now, all of the engineers that I work with are white males. So they grew up in white dominated environments. They grew up in male dominated environments. So they're not used to seeing that experience. So they're still trying to understand, what can you bring that I'm not already exposed to? So that's something that I still trying to educate my coworkers about.
Yes, and I'm really glad that you brought that up. And would Berna wanna add something to that, or add your personal experiences to this question?
Sure, I can add more. I saw Carla unmuted, so I think she has a thought if you wanted. No?
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna tag on, but I'd love to hear what you have to say, Berna.
Sure. Okay. So to Alaya, I really like where you said that someone spoke up and was just like, "Stop, I'm talking." That's something that I feel like kind of flew over my head the first time it ever happened to me. So my manager, my old manager, was very known for talking over people and kind of interjecting without the completion of the thought. And someone on my team called him out and was just like, why do you do that? Why do you think your thought matters? And it's usually those are really awkward interactions. So I think that's something I'll keep in mind too, because I always felt like I couldn't speak up, and that's kind of where I'll transition into my own challenges. So I think for my team, I'm the youngest, and by youngest I mean I could probably be one of their daughters. Like the same age, I'm in the same age group as them, and they joke about it too, because they're just like, oh my gosh, like my daughter's into that stuff too. And I'm just like, okay, cool. But like at this point, it's really tough because now I'm dealing with age, race, and what was the other one? Oh, gender. So it was really hard for me at first to speak up. And I think that it also stems from like how we were raised, or at least like in my household, it was a lot of it was, you know, respect to your elders. And so a lot of the times when people would be shouting their ideas, I was just like, okay, so your ideas are pretty good. I don't think mine can match up. And I think that was a lot of that was the imposter syndrome in me talking. And I mentioned this to Claire, where, you know, I have a spot at the table. There's a reason why I'm here. It's not luck. It's not, you know, someone gave it to me. I worked hard for this, and that's why I'm here at the table. So I have an equal voice. So that's where I start to kind of be like, okay, I'm speaking up. This is my idea and all that stuff. And I started to kind of push myself in that direction, which really helped. Because, you know, half the time, everyone else in the room probably doesn't even know what they're talking about. So everyone's just kind of throwing ideas in there. So just throwing that out there kind of helps navigate the conversations.
Imposter syndrome is a very real thing, and I think much more prevalent in women than in men, at every level. I hear what you're saying. I think there's like people that love to hear themselves talk, no matter where you are in your career. People that will gaslight you, and I think with more heterogeneity, more women in positions of leadership, that really does start to turn the table. So I am in a small nonprofit myself right now. There are 5 directors, including the CEO, and 3 of us are women. So, you know, now it's, you know, I think much more balanced in being able to share ideas and thought. But I think, you know, a basic respect is a two-way street, and really you don't force respect, but you engender it by leading by example, by being a good listener. When you listen, you are able to recognize new ideas and good ideas, like both you guys are saying. So I think for me, the challenge has been, and sometimes in these, when I'm dealing with, in my old position where I was a researcher and investigator, you know, dealing with some of the faculty and other, my faculty colleagues at different universities. And, you know, some of them are very senior and had an opinion on how to do an approach from some study design and the results that we were getting out of it. And my experience with that was like when they were just being adamant and like not really hearing what other people in the room, including myself, were saying about why they were wrong. It was really frustrating, and they just wanted to push forward. And when I took this to my boss at that time, he's a male, thought, he was like, you know, I think you're being too sensitive about this, and you shouldn't be so sensitive about this, and making it feel like it's not a real problem, but it's my problem. And I think that is something that is, you talk through with other colleagues and come to understand that it's not really, you know, where it's not you, where it is really, it's the other perception, the other ego that is forcing that on you. But, you know, it takes some humility. That I think it is like that self-doubt, you know, there's few people that have enough humility and self-awareness to really examine, at least, you know, I'm always asking myself, okay, where did I go? Did I make a mistake? Where did something go wrong? Or where did, you know, where's the hole in the Swiss cheese? But I wonder how many people do that for themselves when they are coming forward so forcefully with a viewpoint or a perspective that do you really stop and think about all the limitations in what you're saying? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think finding those allies that help you really clearly see through where you yourself are not seeing the whole problem or the picture, but also understanding where you do and where, that your experience, your knowledge, all your training leads you down a path that you should feel confident in, and confident even in what you don't know. Because that's the thing, is the more you know, the more questions you should have. And then the more that leads to more questions and more uncertainty in some respects. But you just always, that's the nature of science. It's evolving and it's iterative, and shouldn't feel like it's static. And no one should come to something with 100% saying this is the answer, because eventually you will find something that will tell you it's sort of the answer. There's something else.
I do have a story that I would like to share that I think kind of strengthens the points that you, Carla, have mentioned, and even Berna. So as I mentioned before, I think I have a very supportive team in my company, but we didn't always have that. So there was one instance that is still, I think it's traumatizing to me to talk about, but it was our CGO, so our Chief Growth Officer. He messaged me, our Director of Engineering, and our Director of Design in a group chat, asking for thought about how to, I think it was some sort of prototyping kit that we wanted to share with a potential client. So he asked us for our ideas, and I shared that as an intern, me and another coworker had made a lot of samples that we could potentially use, just to share, to save material, save resources. We've already made it. I was just throwing out ideas. And the first message back was our Director of Design saying, stop, me and the other director will discuss it. And completely just pushing away my, my thought. So, I apologize, because I think I was such in shock in the moment that I was just immediately shut up. Oh man, I'm getting emotional talking about it. Yeah, he told me to stop, and I didn't know what to do, because I think it's hard for us. Oh my God, I don't know why I'm crying.
No, it's okay. You can let it out. I'll
A
pass
lot
it
to unpack.
To Berna's point, it's hard to find that voice sometimes, and for someone to just shut up my voice, I didn't know what to do. So my first reaction was to apologize to him. And my CGO and my CEO, being the supportive people that they are, my CGO immediately called me, and he said, "I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. No one should have to go through that." My CEO immediately came into my office and apologized to me in person. And since then, that person has left the company, and we can see now that we've hired more females, we've hired more people of color, and I think now we're at a place where everyone is supporting each other, but we weren't always like that. And I think that's one thing that we need to acknowledge, is using your voice. It's hard for us because history tells us that females are supposed to just follow the lead, right? And it's hard for us to find that voice and speak up when you're put in those positions. And I think that's something that we all need to learn, is how to speak up. Because it's still something that I challenge with now, is if someone is challenging me, it's hard to use my voice, because your first reaction is just apologize, I'm sorry, and then you question yourself, am I doing something wrong that someone is questioning me? So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm so sorry you went through that, but it's so common, right? And Bert talked about imposter syndrome all the time. I had, again, and the challenge is that when you do speak up for yourself, then you are, this pariah. You're this the Asian witch that's hard, or some kind of dragon lady or something like that. But I had one of the principal investigators when I was at the University of Washington, she was the head of the Center for AIDS Research, and the data coordinating center for this whole North American, and also focused on just the US network of clinical sites that conducted HIV research on health outcomes. So real, like, pragmatic, very practical clinical research, not clinical trial, but using cohort data. But anyway, when I was leaving, she was hard as nails, and she was really smart, and she is an MD, and she has research background. But she didn't take any guff, right? And she asked very direct questions, and I got along with her really well. I was leaving though, and I was taking a job to be an investigator at Kaiser Research. So she warned me though that the person I was going to work for basically didn't know what he was doing. This is the person kind of gaslighting me a little bit too, once I went to go work for him. And I was like, okay, well, I have to make a move for my family, and I need to, this is a great opportunity, blah, blah, blah. But like all those years late, it's like been 10 years since I worked with her now. 7 years since I worked with her now. And I just feel like I should write her a note that said, thank you. Like you were right. I mean, the job I took was good for my career. It led me to the one I have now, but she was right. Maybe if I didn't go there and I had a different experience, my career would be something very, very different. I mean, who knows? But I think it goes back to, again, mentorship and surrounding your team, developing, and see, that person didn't stick around because everybody else knew he was an idiot too, apparently. So, actually, but I think it's really common, especially in science.
Right.
It's incredible. I can't tell you the number of scientists I've worked for that have no social skills whatsoever. And it's just like, how do you function in the real world? Like, you are so, there's a book, Even Cowboys Get the Blues, right? And in a passage in that I will never forget, it's like, if you invited Van Gogh over to your house, he would surely shit on your couch. And I never could remember to take the biscuits out of the oven. It's just like, these people are so focused on the one thing that they do that they don't have no soft skills.
Mhm.
It's amazing how they can function in society sometimes.
Right. To mirror that, I think finding that mentor, because I was very fortunate that my CGO and my CEO were supportive of me, right? And so they helped build a team that now is very powerful, and everyone feels empowered. Like, for example, one of the projects that we're working on now is we're partnered with a university, and their whole team is made up of female engineers, which is great. So this is one of the samples that we actually came up with. This was a female engineer who designed this. And we never would have been here if we still had those, say, for example, those directors as part of our team, because they thought that their ideas were the best, that no one else needed to provide any input. But if that was the case, we wouldn't have gotten to something like this.
You want to make some money, Alaya? You got to make a mammogram machine that doesn't press into a plate. Those were designed by men. I'm pretty sure of that. So get to work on that biomedical engineering.
Yes, and would Berna like to add something onto that if you'd like?
Yeah, of course. So to kind of just piggyback off of the whole mentorship thing, my manager before was a male, and when I first entered the company, I told him all my involvement with the women in ITI, telling him all these different things that I was interested in and like empowering women. And he was actually one of the co-sponsors for the employee resource group we have at the company. And I thought that was enough, but as I went through the years of working with him, I kind of learned that he was very much the person who was like the center of attention. So it was hard for me to find that voice. And it wasn't until I think halfway through my first year at Sanofi was when my teammate, I would confide in him, and he would just be like, you know what, he says a lot of stuff. Just let him talk. He likes to talk, but don't shut yourself down. Don't make yourself feel small. Always speak up. And then my coworker actually introduced me to this awesome woman in tech And so she's my full-on mentor now. So just kind of emphasizing the importance of having that mentor in the workplace or even outside, whichever. And I'll just never forget this one time when I was one of the first couple meetings I had with her. She I think she kind of counted how many times I said sorry, and she was just like, "Why do you keep saying sorry?" And I was like, "I honestly don't know." And it's a really bad habit, and that's something that she straight up was just like, "Stop saying sorry if you don't have anything to apologize for. Stop saying sorry because it makes you sound weak." And then I was just like, okay, I'll never say sorry again. So instead of saying sorry, I've kind of reframed that to saying, well, thank you for your patience, or thank you for this, or just not saying sorry. And I've learned to do that in my emails too, because a lot of the times I'm just like, why am I apologizing for being late? People reply to my emails like 10 days later, and it's just like the sense of urgency is not there. So then I'm just like, okay, well, thank you for waiting for my response. Here's what I found. And I think it really helps in terms of not like making your voice heard, and then also just not apologizing as much. It's really hard. It was a bad habit of mine, and I still struggle with it, honestly.
And yes, wow, like I'm grateful that you guys like told these stories and like told your personal experiences, because like some people, of course, like they don't want to say it because in some cases they don't think that it should be heard, or like they want to confine themselves in that position. But like I'm very grateful that you guys said these stories, because like I myself am a woman in STEM, and like some people don't see it, like some people ignore this issue, but like what we do experience should be told. And like there are moments, not even like just in college, but even in high school, that we like experienced where we felt as though we were oppressed, and like some people would just ignore this issue. And sometimes it's scary to even speak about it, because sometimes you feel alone. But like I'm glad that like we're all here together to speak about this, because there might be some person in the audience who feels the same way, or who've dealt with similar experiences. So like I'm grateful that you guys spoke about this, and you guys are just so brave and courageous. Like I just have to say that. Okay. Okay, I love you guys. You guys are great. So like moving onwards is the audience Q&A. And of course, like if there's anybody in the audience who's like willing to like ask a question, if you guys have any comments that you'd like to say, like this is a time for that right now. And of course, like if there aren't any questions right now, I can actually like, I actually do have a few questions myself. So what would you guys have done differently if you could go like back in time, either in college or taking in your first job in STEM? Like just looking back and reflecting on what happened in the past, was there anything that you wanted to change, or like any specific events that could have gone differently?
Kind of going to Berna's point is to stop apologizing so much. Sometimes it's not your fault, and that's just such a reactionary thing for you to say, I'm sorry, go ahead. But in reality, you shouldn't be apologizing if there's nothing to apologize for. And I think even that story that I shared, like I had no reason to apologize, but that was my first reaction. So if I were to go back, I would try to tell myself, hey, your point is valid, so you shouldn't have to apologize for having to share your input.
That's very true.
One of my first mentors, who is now the COO at the Equal Employment Opportunity Council and was the COO at the NAACP, had told me that exactly that, is that stop apologizing. You don't have anything to apologize for. And she's the one who introduced this idea of, imposter syndrome. And she, like, this is like, 1992. She's talking to me about this stuff. And I was like, she actually was the first person that named it for me. This is while I was in college. And I was just like, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I feel. And sometimes that's just so powerful, is for somebody to give it a name. I think people with disease conditions, like even now with this post-COVID or post viral syndrome that you see people that had COVID and then they don't sometimes even know they had COVID, but they come up with these symptoms like long standing, or people that had the acute infection and still have it. They don't have anything to really call it. Nobody has coalesced around a name. So they're getting all this, the doctors don't know what to call it. They call them hypochondriacs. It's really very much, you need a name. You need to call it something so that you could actually identify it and label it when it's happening to you.
And would Berna like to touch upon that as well?
Sure. The question was what we would have done differently.
Yes.
Great question. I think one thing that I wish I did differently was when I first started off at my job, I was definitely in like the learning seat. So I would always be the one to take notes at meetings, and it kind of pivoted to a role that I didn't want. So everyone was kind of like, all right, Brenna, did you take the meeting minutes? And I'm just like, no. I'm like, they kind of expected it. And it was kind of like, is this like because I'm a woman? And is this because because that was the thing. None of the guys on my team would ever take notes, and they would ping me just like out of the blue. I was like, did you take notes on this? And I was like, no, I mean, I have it, but like, why did you expect me to have it? So I think if anything, what I wish I did differently was kind of pivot away from that rule. I learned after to kind of take more, I guess, better notes instead of just kind of documenting the entire meeting, because it just became a secretary role. And that's something that someone called out to me. They were just like, you're not the secretary of the team. Stop like thinking, stop doing this stuff, and people, because people expect it. And that's something that where I was just like, okay, well, I have to figure out how to transition from being a learner and being someone who actively participates in these calls. Because that's something that also ties back to the whole speaking up thing. I felt like I didn't have enough to contribute. So if I were taking notes, it means I was still participating in the meeting, but then it ended up backfiring against me because people were just like, oh, she's the one who takes the minutes. When in reality, that wasn't my job. It was something that was kind of put onto me. So if that were something I would do differently, that's definitely one of the things up there, because it's hard to get out of that role.
It's true. And I'm glad that you touched upon that as well. Okay. So like the last portion that we're gonna do is basically the words of wisdom. And it's where you, like all of you guys can like summarize on like other suggestions that you would give out to the audience. Like, are there any other words of advice or suggestions that you would give out to the audience who are like part of college? Like, it's just a general question on like advice, on suggestions, on and like anything in general. So would anyone like to start?
I can start. Oh, go ahead, Berna.
Okay. In terms of words of advice, I think from a college perspective, definitely have that balance between fun and academics. I definitely miss my free time in college and being able to just walk down the street or go to a different campus and be like, hey, someone want to grab food? Because that's something that I really do miss a lot. So definitely have that balance. And I know it's hard right now because obviously we're in a pandemic, but that is what really helped me build that support system. So a lot of my support system comes from RAPS, and the other activities I was part of. They're the people I turn to when work really sucks. So having that is such a great toolkit. It's a great part of my toolkit. And then just the time management and self-discipline. That's something I wish I had more of. I was one of the people who would I'd had a paper assigned like 3 weeks ago, and then the night that it's due, my friends were like, oh, let's go drink, and I'm just like, I didn't do this paper, so I can't. So that's definitely something that I would definitely kind of advocate for it. Really lock in that time management and self-discipline, and then especially mental health. Your mental health matters a lot. And Carla said it before, and Alana actually touched upon it too. There was a quote that I saw that was like, if you don't give your body time to rest, your body will find time to rest. So that's something that make sure that you continue to take care of yourself. Make sure you drink a lot of water, exercise, all that stuff. And these are things that I need to take advice of too. So I'm just gonna manifest in the universe here real quick. But yeah.
One thing I would like to add, because yes, mental health is important. You need to definitely make time for yourself. And I think everyone kind of touched on this, but the importance of learning how to use your voice. And I know that's easier to say than done, because like I said, it's still something that I challenge with myself. But yeah, it's learning how to speak up when it's asked for, because I think that's, if you start to train yourself how to do that now, it's going to be easier when you get into the workplace, and just to kind of push yourself to be able to feel open enough to go and do that. Yeah, I think that's the main takeaways. Learn how to use your voice. If you're a female, if you are a person of color, if you're Filipino-American in the workplace, use your voice. Even in school, use your voice, because it's always someone is asking for you to give your input. That means it matters.
Yeah, that's very true. And would Carla like to speak about this issue? Not this issue, but like overall advice.
So words of wisdom. I think just to add to what has already been said, I would just say to really immerse yourself in experiences, find mentors, and allies, and allow your mind to be nimble enough to identify examples that you can actually learn from. And I think, given the shooting that has happened in Georgia for against the Asian American community, again, I think as Asian Americans, we have been fed this model minority stereotype that, for some purposes is, I think, at least from, my parents' perspective, that was supposed to be a good thing, right? But it can be, stereotypes can help people get over some difficulties and adversities, but they could also, what that does is erases the true harm that's being done in our community, and not giving it a voice, not recognizing when that happens, and the need to really find solidarity in the examples of our African American, our Black neighbors, our Latino neighbors. I'll just tell you one story that I didn't realize until I went to the funeral of my uncle, that he came to the US from the Philippines when he was in high school. So, and they told a story during his funeral that they would go to Delano County in California over the summer and pick grapes when they were in high school. And actually they were picking grapes alongside Cesar Chavez. So Filipino-Americans have a long history in this country. It's not just the 1965 wave of professionals that came here that were like my parents, engineers and accountants, but they were, railroad workers and farmers that came in the early 1900s and on down, that really are a fabric in this country and endured a lot of racism, and also helped to really build a movement. If you think about the resilience of Filipino people throughout history, from the EDSA revolution and onward, there is a lot of resilience in this community, and a lot of brotherhood with other ethnicities in this country that, the experience of one racial group and their integration into America is the experience of America. And so we really need to find allies and see the examples of others and how they relate to us, and how they help lift all of us up. I think there's a very famous poem from Martin Niemöller, who was a German theologian and also a Lutheran pastor. He wrote that poem, They Came For Me. I don't know if you've heard it. It starts with when they came for the socialists, I said nothing because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the communists. I said nothing because I'm not a communist. They came for the Jews. I said nothing because I'm not Jewish. And then they came for me and there was no one left. So we have to advocate for ourselves, advocate for each other, and learn lessons.
I'm grateful that like you brought that issue up, and especially of what happened this week. And like I know it's a very difficult topic, but like all of us need to recognize that these things happen and we need to step up on what we can do and what we should do. So like I have another question. Are there any aspects of your like Filipino Asian American culture that have helped you persevere through your challenges and through your difficult journeys?
When I'm sad, I eat lechon.
Oh. Yeah, I would say that's funny. I like that. Oh.
I can't top that. No, I'm having a hard time coming up with an answer. I don't necessarily think it's our culture in general, but something that my mom kind of instilled in me, because when her and my dad came here to America, well, when we all came here to America, they actually have been working odd jobs this entire time. So they never really got to put their degrees to use. So whenever it came to us, one of the things that she'd always say, if they can do it, I can do it too. And, my mom the other day, she was like, I want to be an LPN, so I might go back to school. And I'm just like, awesome. So if anything, just keep striving, like keep learning. You're in charge of your own path. There's no one can say no to you. You like, to Carla's point, you're an advocate for yourself. Like, you gotta put in the work though. But also trust in yourself. That's also part of it.
Would Alai like to say anything about this?
I don't even know how to answer that question. I feel like that's such a hard question. I think to Berna's point, it's Filipinos have such a sense of community, I think, which is why I think even for Berna mentioned that RAPS community has been such a resource for me, even after school. So having that culture of all of these people kind of being here for each other has definitely helped, not even just professionally, but personally as well.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Like, I just say like my whole family, it's always just like a community. It's not just like religion, food, or culture, but it's always like when you need someone or when you need someone to talk to, they're there. And like that's what I like about this community as well. It's like the Rutgers Association RAPS community. Like although some people feel as though like they're alone or they don't have the resources, like there's always someone out there, especially part of RAPS, that you can always reach out to. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm very grateful that all of you guys spoke about all the goals of topics, brought up what happened this week, and brought up your challenges that you guys experienced, along with your experiences and accomplishments as a woman in STEM. So like if you guys would like to put down your like contact information as well as like your LinkedIn or the Gmails in the group chat, that would be really amazing. Yeah. So like I'll pass it off to Ruan for RAPS announcements.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, for moderating this meeting. And thank you so much to our panelists for sharing all your experiences and being as open as possible with us about your struggles, and bringing up all these different points about how to persevere through all of it, stand up for yourself. I think it's very important going forward, especially with everything going on, just to stay resilient, and your resiliency really came out through all your stories and everything you have to share. So I thank you so much. And for anyone who wasn't able to come today, or if any of your friends wanted to come, but they weren't able to. This meeting is being recorded, so I will be posting this on our YouTube channel so that everything they had to share here is available to the whole RAPS community. Whatever you want to get out of it, it's going to be there. Also, I will be putting out a document with all their contact information, in whatever form they want to be contacted, as well as some resources that they may have. I know a lot of resources were passed around in the chat, so I'll be sure to put those on there as well. In terms of just RAPS announcements, if you guys weren't aware, our 20th anniversary of Battle of the Barrios is coming up. It's in about 2-3 weeks, April 9th. So I hope you guys are excited. We have a lot in store for it. And other announcements, I'm not sure, but with that, thank you everyone for showing up. This meeting was amazing. Thank you guys. Just be sure to use and make sure to reach out to these panelists. They really want to help you and they had a lot to share. So don't be shy, connect with them. I'm sure like they could possibly be your mentor if you really wanted to, if they're available. So make sure you utilize these and build these connections so that you could advance your career and continue to grow in your field. So yeah, that is the end of our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all, guys. Thank you all for coming.
You guys have a great week and great rest of your weekend.
All right, thanks, guys.